All right, today we are recording a special episode of our first Thursday of the month webinar, Building a Better Business, because I forgot to hit record. And Emily Hobson and Kai Lin would both like to kill me, as you can tell from their facial expressions. Emily is clearly the kind that murders with a big smile on her face, and Kai Lin looks very stern while she's doing it. Anyway, we are going to re-record this. We had a live recording earlier today. Went super well. Emily's going to blow through these slides here so that you guys can get the content that we can share online. There were a number of questions in the live session that I am not going to include here. If we can find a way to dub them together, I will. But those obviously will not be here. So with that, I'll just remind everybody that this is the first Thursday of the month. This is April 2nd. We do these Building a Better Business webinars on the first Thursday of every month, and we do the fundamentals of financials on the third Thursday of every month. So please come and attend. Emily, with that, let's get going. Welcome to our first of the month webinar.
All right. So we've talked so far about hiring, firing, training, and it feels like last month we talked about delegation. This month we're going to talk my favorite topic of all, culture eats cattle for breakfast. So we're going to talk about building teams that stick. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what exactly is culture, what does that mean? Why don't our teams stick? We'll talk a little bit about the 5 dysfunctions of team there. The invisible forces that shape our team that are in the background that are really building the culture. One of the things too we're going to talk about today is team dynamics versus team performance. Things that people, businesses that work with me hear a lot about the how versus the what. So we'll deep dive into that. My favorite topic is the discretionary effort. So we'll go into energy and motivation behind your employees. I've got the no BS culture toolkit. And then finally, we'll wrap up with our call to action that we finish with every month. So, John, we said this the first time. Tell me in your words, what does it mean culture eats cattle for breakfast?
Oh boy, and I'm going to have a different answer than I had before because now I've learned a lot more. I've taken the webinar, so this is like cheating. But I think what we have to understand is that the culture that we build over time becomes something that is very powerful and will override many of the other functions in our business. So we may think we have processes in place and that sort of thing, but ultimately culture is what wins out.
Yep. And what we talked about earlier is we're seeing phenomenal cattle markets, but there's been a time in our lives where we haven't seen good markets. Um, we're in drought in many parts of the country. We're seeing fire in many parts of the country. We've survived all of these things. We've survived these things because we've had good culture. Things that our businesses cannot survive are bad culture. That will be the crux of whether you have a fifth generation ranch or whether it ends with us. All right, so I went on and did some research and got the Encyclopedia Britannica's version of what is culture. So, workplace culture is the shared values, beliefs, behaviors, and social norms that shape how employees interact, perform, and feel within an organization. What we talked about earlier, and one of the things that I am so passionate about is this is why mission and vision are critically important to operations. It has to be the forefront of what we do. We have to start with that, and it has to be something that our employees know, because that's how they're going to feel when they work. So we said that big fancy definition. What does that actually mean? So I'll tell you what it's not. It's not perks and benefits. It's not allowing your employees to hunt on the ranch for free or offering housing or a vehicle. It's not flexible work solutions, whether we give them a 4-day, 4 10s, or you only have to work part-time. It's not feeding the crew at branding, and it's not just the niceties and being polite. Although all of those things are very important in 2026 to having a good workplace and places that employees want to come work for. It is not actually what culture is. When we talk about what culture is, it's a shared cause. It's how people feel when they show up. It's what behaviors are repeated and replicated day in and day out. And ultimately, Culture is a lived experience by your employees. So today, when they're in the truck, in the field, in the office, or wherever they are, what experience they're living right now, that's the culture that you have built or haven't built. Again, it shows up in the truck. Culture shows up after an employee makes a mistake and how feedback is handled. The key here is that culture is reinforced whether intentional or not. All right, so barring I'm moving across the country, I had a baby, I'm leaving an organization for something that is very, very legitimate, which are things that happen. Why do good people leave our businesses? Good people don't leave because of hard work. I hear people all the time say, it's 110 degrees in Texas, or sometimes we have to work 7 days a week. The work is hard, the work is grueling, the work is physical. That's not why people leave. That's an excuse we tell ourselves. People leave because work is confusing and the environment is frustrating. These 5 things you can apply to almost every single exit interview I've ever done. If you take these 5 categories and apply them to your ranch, that's why good people are leaving. That's why good people leave other organizations. They want to feel appreciated. They need good communication. They need ownership and growth, clarity, and consistent expectations. So playing on Patrick Lencioni's The Five Dysfunctions of Team here, 5 main reasons why teams aren't sticking together. We're not saying what we really think. We're avoiding real conversations. No one really buys in. They don't really understand our mission. No one holds each other accountable. Uh, we let things slide and we protect comfort over results. Even me who's in HR, I don't like uncomfortable situations. I don't like having to have those hard conversations or calling somebody out or doing an investigation. It's not fun for me either. But we can't protect our comfort over results in moving the business forward. Trust, like Patrick Lencioni says, trust is the foundation of real teamwork. And the culture doesn't break all at once, it erodes slowly over time. We hear it almost every month. We hear it seems like the quote doesn't not come up everywhere we are. Every problem is a people problem. And Patrick Lencioni said it. It's not finance, it's not strategy, it's not your really cool technology. Teamwork remains the ultimate competitive advantage if you can figure it out. So, what are the invisible forces that are shaping your team today? Culture isn't what you say, it's actually what's happening. So if someone shows up late, if you're allowing people to cut corners, you're allowing people to disrespect others and nothing's happening, you're actually creating culture. It's just not a good one. So these are some of the questions that we can go through and look at ourselves and look at our businesses and say, what are we tolerating, avoiding, or ignoring? What are we actually rewarding that we shouldn't be? Or what should we be rewarding? This one here, what gets talked about or not? I'm sure almost in every business we have a startup meeting in the morning, or maybe we have a meeting at the end of the day. What are we actually talking about? Do we have set agendas in those meetings, or are we just kind of having chit chat? Which chit chat is important, but we need to make sure that we're actually talking about the things that need to get talked about, having the hard conversations. And finally, what are our leaders modeling? Us as leaders in our organization need to be modeling the behaviors that are shaping the culture in our businesses. A lot of times, before we move on, people will blame turnover in a business. We get frustrated. We're not finding the right help. The right help is just not out there. Sometimes before we blame high turnover on it being a hiring problem or a workforce problem, we really need to look ourselves in the mirror and see if it's a culture and a tolerance problem and ask these questions of ourselves. All right, so team dynamics versus team performance. I have a lot of conversations with people when we talk about KPIs, performance evaluations. Most leaders look at just performance and completely ignore the dynamics. And the reason why there's a clear distinction here and why it's important is that dynamics will actually eventually determine good or bad performance. And so, what is the difference? Team performance is the what. It's what gets done, the results, output, tasks, or compilation of tasks that make up a job. The dynamics are how it gets done. Are people just bulldozing over one another to get things done? Are we actually working together as a team? Is there good communication? Is there unnecessary tension in the air because we're not having really good, healthy conflict? Is there trust? So if we focus on just the performance piece of it, we're missing the whole aspect of the dynamics. And we really need to be focusing on both of these when we're looking at employees and what's expected. All right, my favorite topic, discretionary effort. What drives energy and motivation? So, the definition of discretionary effort, in my opinion, is the employees that are going the extra mile when no one's looking. This is the magic and the gold in your businesses. You're never going to be able to demand it, and people aren't just going to give it because you ask them to. All that you can do in your businesses is create conditions for it to exist. Those conditions are clarity, respect, trust, and ownership. These are a lot of the things that we talked about last week when we were talking about delegating and what makes delegating successful. But these are the conditions that if you can do these things in your businesses, you are going to drive energy, motivation, and ultimately the end result will be that discretionary effort that you're looking for, where we are all rowing in the same direction and people are picking things up and carrying them alongside with you. All right, so we've been negative. We talked about why people leave, the negative influences for culture, but I want to be a little bit more positive here. Why do good people stay? People stay in your businesses because they know how to win. They feel respected. Problems are getting addressed or they're getting addressed promptly. There's consistency. I know what to expect and I know what's expected of me. And finally, they trust the leadership to do all of these things. Retention and longevity in businesses is not about keeping people happy because you're never going to make people happy. There was a comment earlier when we had the live webinar about paying people enough, right? You need to pay people enough. I think Alex said that, John.
Yep.
Real retention is about removing all of those things that push them out. All right, so my PG version of the No BS Culture Toolkit. I talked earlier. One of the things that when I started this that's important to me, human resources, the term human resources, I think is fairly new to ranchers and farmers. Like they've heard of it, but when they think of human resources, they associate that terminology with like corporate, bureaucrat, principal, right? And it's not a necessarily positive thing. So one of my personal missions is taking human resources and the people function of our businesses and turning it into real actionable things that we can use and things that we look at as driving the culture. And so that's why I use these terms because I want people to understand that we can use these tools as real actionable items in our businesses. So, what are some of the things that we can take away today? A weekly 10-minute recess. So, I say this is a lot like our after action review. A 10-minute reset is at the end of the week, at the beginning of the week, in the middle of the week, whenever it is. Let's do a 10-minute pause. What's going well? What could be better? And what's one thing we can fix this week or we can fix going into next week? The next thing is the say it now rule. If something's bothering you, if there's a bird under your saddle, we need to say it within 24 hours. We don't need to let it fester. Don't give yourself the excuse of, oh, well, they'll be back in the office next week, or I'll bring it up next time they're in a good mood. We don't want to have those excuses. If it's enough that it's bothering you or it's affecting your mood or the employee's mood, we need to say it now. We need to say it within 24 hours. Encourage your teams to do the same. No triangles, no talking triangles. We're not going to talk about people. We are going to talk to people. We are going to model that, and we are going to expect our teams to do that. We don't want, if something's bothering you, to go talk to each other about it. Just cut straight to the triangle. Go straight to the source and say, "Hey, that really bothered me, or you really affected me in a certain way, and I want to make sure that you know that," and create that healthy conflict that really resolves interpersonal issues. Define what a good week looks like. I Rusty Williamson talked to Zach when we were at the retreat a couple of years ago, and asked him, "What does your ideal day look like?" And this particular tool, I want you to take away, sit in some silence, think about when you've had just a badass week. We got work done, we were efficient, we were effective, and I mean, we just had an awesome week all the way around. Sit for a minute and feel how that felt. What were the things we were doing that week that felt good? What were my employees doing that felt good? What were we not doing? And if you can kind of sit in silence and reflect and write some of those things down, you can really start to point yourself in a direction of where we should be going with the culture and what should we be encouraging. And then finally, pick behaviors that you're just not going to tolerate anymore. And you really need to hold firm to that. It's okay in our organizations to say there are very specific things that we're not going to tolerate. And I think it's good to write it down and it's good to communicate. And once you do that, you have to hold the line. You can't let people cross that line, or you've eroded your credibility as the leader in your organization. All right. So, in memory of Lou Holtz, one of my favorite all-time football coaches, I had to end today with one of his quotes. So, in the world, you're either growing or you're dying. So, get in motion and let's grow today. So, let's use these things that we've learned today to actually put into action. So, it leads me into my call to action. So, what I want everyone to do after you've listened today or after you've watched the webinar on YouTube, pause the recording, pick one behavior that you've been tolerating that's not okay. Pick the one behavior, address it within 48 hours, and set one clear expectation about how we're not going to tolerate that behavior anymore. And then start your weekly 10-minute resets. Make sure that we are eating the elephant one bite at a time, and let's start with just one behavior. So if you could do that today, this is your call to action. Pause the video, write it down, relay it to your team. What is one thing that we're not going to do anymore? All right. And my final thoughts for today: culture is built daily. There's not one point in time where your culture was or was not good. It's a daily thing, day in and day out. And it's about these behaviors that we've talked about today. People stay where there's clarity and respect. Today, as you're sitting here listening to this webinar, culture is actively being created in your operation as we speak, whether you realize it or not. You have to understand this. You, as the leader, set the tone. Finally, if your culture is strong and you're doing all of these things that we talked about, your team will solve problems before you even know they exist. If your culture is weak, you will be the bottleneck of everything, and you will continue to see frustration, and you won't be able to move your business forward and achieve the goals that we set forth for ourselves here.
You picking on me?
No, I'm not picking on you, John.
These are really good. These are a little hard to read. So this is awesome. Thank you very much.
You're very
Um,
welcome.
Good. All right. We've been through this twice today, so I apologize to you. Thank you to those who have listened to this point. Anything you want to add before we close? There were some good comments in the live portion, but I think you've nailed it here and covered a lot of stuff. The biggest thing here, I think there is a lot of accountability on leaders to create good culture, and I think this third bullet point of yours about, this is kind of like riding a horse, right? You're either riding him to get better every day, or you're not, and you're training them one way or the other. You just have to decide what direction you want it to go. And culture requires an incredible amount of vigilance, because the sad thing is, once bad habits or bad tendencies get put in place, they are very hard and often expensive to undo. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it it's we should bring up one of the things that we talked about at the end of the live webinar is somebody asked the question about if I'm the employee in this situation.
Yes, right.
And one of the things that I want to drive home, if you're an employee listening to this, is that you have an obligation to, in the right time and place, bring these things up. If this is something that you know you're working for a business and they have core values and a mission and a vision and they're not living it, open the space, open the door. It's going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to have to take a risk, but go to that leader and say, "Hey, this behavior or this activity isn't living out our core values." And then the last thing that we talked about was if you are that leader and somebody comes to you, one of your employees actually has the courage to come to you and say, "You're not living out our core values," or "This behavior shouldn't be tolerated," you need to say, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention." Even if you disagree, even if you think it's outlandish, thank them for bringing it to your attention, because that's going to create the trust and build that psychological safety net to where they can come to you time and time again.
Even if every fiber of your being wants to shut that down and let them know who's boss, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I am very, very lucky to have been part of a lot of really good teams. I love the team that we have going here. I do think there is incredible power in culture. I have also had the privilege to work on some bad ones. And I do think that whether you are an official leader, with a title or not, there is a tremendous amount every individual can do to lead the organization. I've seen many cases where someone in a lower position, or lower titled position, has been able to change a culture by just their sort of force of personality and their absolute insistence on being great. And I love to see those circumstances. You kind of hate to wish anybody into that circumstance because it's very difficult and very uncomfortable, but some people can get it done. And I love to be around those types of people.
Agreed.
Excellent. Emily, thank you so much. Appreciate you doing it. And look forward to next month. Those of you that are watching, we do this webinar every month. The first Thursday of the month, we do a Building a Better Business webinar. And on the third Thursday, we do the Fundamentals of Finance. So stay tuned. Come back in a couple of weeks. And Thursday afternoon, watch for us on this same web link. Thank you, Emily. Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you.